The 7 levels of iconic vampires in movie history. Explained Level 1. Count Orlok, Nosferatu, 1922. The Nightmare Origin. Max Schreck's Count Orlok in Nosferatu birthed cinema's vampire mythology, a creature of absolute terror, defining horror filmmaking forever. This wasn't the sophisticated nobleman later iterations would present, but rather a walking plague, death incarnate with grotesque features suggesting medieval nightmares. The prosthetic work was groundbreaking for 1922. Schreck's appearance featured a hairless dome-shaped skull, sharp pointed ears resembling a bat's, elongated skeletal fingers ending in sharp talons, and protruding front teeth like a rodent. Every visual choice emphasized pestilence over seduction. Director F.W. Murnau used German expressionist techniques, dramatic shadows and distorted angles to make Orlok's presence feel otherworldly and threatening. One sequence became eternally iconic, Orlok climbing stairs toward his victim Ellen. Audiences see only shadows cast against the wall, those impossibly long fingers extending, the silhouette manipulating the doorknob, the claw-like hand sliding up Ellen's body to grasp her heart. This single image has echoed through cinema history for a century, referenced everywhere from animated shows to contemporary horror. Schreck's physical performance was revolutionary for silent cinema. He moved with unnatural rigidity combined with predatory intent, seeming to float rather than walk normally, torso eerily still while his hands reached with hunger. The unsettling quality suggested something fundamentally wrong with his existence. His portrayal was so convincing that urban legends claimed Schreck might genuinely be undead. Legally, Nosferatu shouldn't exist. Produced without authorization as a Dracula adaptation, Bram Stoker's estate successfully sued, demanding destruction of every copy. Yet Prince survived, preserving cinema's foundational vampire, pure malevolence, bringing death and disease, establishing sunlight as the vampire's ultimate weakness, and creating conventions that would define the genre for generations. Level 2. Bela Lugosi's Dracula, 1931, the aristocratic template. Bela Lugosi's 1931 portrayal revolutionized vampires from hideous creatures into hypnotic aristocrats. Where Orlok inspired revulsion, Lugosi cultivated dangerous fascination, creating the suave, cape-wearing template that dominated vampire imagery for decades. Lugosi's theatrical background proved essential. After performing Dracula on Broadway hundreds of times through touring productions, he possessed absolute command over timing, gesture, and vocal delivery. His Count appeared as Transylvanian royalty in evening wear with dramatic cape, speaking slowly with deliberate pauses, his thick Hungarian accent adding mysterious allure rather than comedy. His most famous line, "I never drink wine," became instantly quotable, delivered with perfect timing suggesting both refinement and menace. His acting style reflected cinema's awkward transition from silent to sound films. Lugosi's exaggerated movements and theatrical pauses felt operatic. Most memorable was his piercing gaze. Lugosi could mesmerize audiences through intensity alone, suggesting supernatural hypnotic abilities without requiring special effects. Securing the role demanded sacrifice. Universal Pictures initially pursued Lon Chaney Sr., the man of 1,000 faces, who died before production started. Executives doubted Lugosi, considering him too foreign for American audiences. Lugosi accepted merely $3,500 for 7 weeks' work, significantly less than supporting actors. Desperately wanting to prove himself, his gamble succeeded spectacularly. Dracula became a massive hit, launching Universal's monster movie franchise and establishing Lugosi as a star. But fame became imprisonment. His heavy accent restricted other opportunities, leading to relentless typecasting. Later years brought financial hardship and morphine dependency. Upon his 1956 death, Lugosi was interred wearing his Dracula cape, the character having completely absorbed his identity. His legacy established vampire iconography, aristocratic bearing, formal attire with flowing cape, mesmerizing charm concealing predatory instincts. Every vampire since either honors or deliberately subverts Lugosi's foundational template. Level 3, Christopher Lee's Dracula, 1958, The Sexual Predator. Christopher Lee's Hammer Films portrayal injected explicit sexuality and physical violence into vampire mythology. While Lugosi created elegance, Lee restored genuine terror, presenting Dracula as a towering predator, radiating power, danger, and forbidden sexual energy. Lee's physicality transformed the role. At 6'4", with chiseled aristocratic features and commanding presence, his Dracula intimidated through sheer physical dominance before uttering words. Hammer Studios embraced previously forbidden eroticism. For the first time, blood appeared vibrant red rather than monochrome gray, and Lee's Dracula didn't merely bite. He seduced victims, creating scenes saturated with psychosexual tension. The makeup innovations were striking. Lee's extended fangs appeared genuinely lethal, often blood-stained, creating visceral horror. When he snarled with bared teeth and eyes glowing crimson with bloodlust, audiences felt authentic fear. His attack sequences became violent and animalistic, grabbing victims forcefully, throwing them down, feeding with savage intensity, conveying both hunger and violation. Director Terence Fisher progressively reduced Lee's dialogue, believing Dracula became more terrifying as pure force of nature rather than conversationalist. By sequel films, Lee barely spoke, transformed into embodied menace. While this frustrated Lee artistically, he wanted exploring character depth, it enhanced the Count's iconic status. Lee portrayed Dracula across 10 Hammer productions spanning 16 years. More than any performer. He grew to despise the repetition, feeling trapped in typecasting similar to Lugosi's fate, frequently calling scripts terrible and attempting to refuse roles before contractual obligations forced compliance. Despite his frustrations, Lee's interpretation became definitive for entire generations. His combination of aristocratic sophistication, physical threat, and sexual danger created a vampire simultaneously seductive and genuinely frightening, cape billowing, eyes blazing red, fangs dripping crimson, the archetypal predator wearing human form. Level 4, Tom Cruise's Lestat, 1994. The rock star vampire. Tom Cruise's Lestat de Liancourt, in Interview with the Vampire, presented vampires fully embracing their dark nature with theatrical flourish and magnetic charisma. Unlike tortured predecessors conflicted about vampirism, Lestat revels in immortality, treating eternal life as his personal stage for ego and indulgence. Initial casting sparked controversy. Author Anne Rice created Lestat as a tall blonde aristocrat and publicly condemned Cruise's casting, suggesting he and Brad Pitt exchange roles. Her criticism wounded Cruise significantly. However, after viewing the completed film, Rice dramatically reversed her position, purchasing a 2-page Variety advertisement praising Cruise's unforgettable performance and publicly apologizing for her previous statements. Cruise's Lestat embodies theatrical excess. He hunts with dramatic flair, torments victims gleefully, and literally dances among plague corpses as though attending a celebration. His blonde locks, elaborate period costumes, and flamboyant mannerisms made him cinema's first explicitly queer-coded vampire. The homoerotic tension between Lestat and Louis, Brad Pitt, was unmistakable, adding forbidden desire layers to their toxic dynamic. His cruelty masks profound loneliness. When transforming Louis into a vampire, Lestat's motivation stems less from offering companionship to Louis than from his own desperate fear of solitude. Louis perceives this truth. It's you who needs me. When Louis attempts leaving, Lestat creates the child vampire Claudia as emotional blackmail, forming an unstable family, bound by hatred, yet eternally connected. His true vulnerability isn't sunlight or stakes, it's abandonment. Physical preparation proved demanding. Cruise studied the entire Vampire Chronicles series comprehensively, endured painful prosthetic contact lenses, causing constant irritation, and dealt with repeatedly breaking fangs throughout filming. Night shooting schedules created misery for everyone. Brad Pitt loathed production so intensely he requested contract release, learning it would cost $40 million. The on-set tension ironically enhanced their screen dynamic. Cruise's vibrant, flamboyant Lestat contrasting perfectly with Pitt's brooding, melancholic Louis. Level 5. Gary Oldman's Dracula, 1992, The Tragic Romantic. Gary Oldman's performance in Francis Ford Coppola's interpretation reinvented Dracula as a tragic romantic figure, transforming him from pure malevolence into someone driven by devastating loss and eternal love. This version wasn't simply monstrous. He was a man destroyed by grief who became something terrible. Coppola incorporated backstory absent from Stoker's original. Dracula began as Prince Vlad, who renounced God after his beloved Elisabetta took her own life upon receiving false reports of his battlefield death. Believing the church had condemned her soul to damnation, Vlad desecrated his chapel and received immortality's curse. Centuries later, discovering Mina Harker represents Elisabetta's reincarnation drives his obsessive pursuit across continents to reclaim his lost love. Oldman inhabited Dracula through multiple forms and ages. As the ancient Count greeting Jonathan Harker, he wore elaborate prosthetics, creating a wizened, reptilian appearance with impossibly elongated nails and bizarre hair styled resembling horns. As the youthful prince seducing Mina in Victorian London, he transformed into a handsome gentleman wearing dark spectacles and top hat. His werewolf manifestation was nightmarish CGI-enhanced savagery, while his bat form appeared equally monstrous. Daily makeup transformations consumed hours. Oldman endured extensive prosthetic applications, colored contact lenses, and elaborate costumes designed by Eiko Ishioka that earned an Academy Award. The film's visual extravagance, swirling capes, expressionist shadows, gothic grandeur, created operatic atmosphere matching Oldman's intensely theatrical approach. Oldman brought genuine emotional depth to the character. His Dracula wept from loneliness, raged from betrayal, and loved with desperate intensity. His declaration, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you," became an iconic romantic statement, reframing vampire obsession from predatory stalking into tortured devotion. When Mina chose freeing Dracula from his curse rather than condemning him, it completely reframed vampire mythology. Redemption through love, replacing destruction through violence. This portrayal influenced everything following. Suddenly, vampires could be sympathetic, their monstrousness explained through trauma rather than inherent evil. Level 6. Robert Pattinson's Edward Cullen, 2008. The Teenage Heartthrob. Robert Pattinson's Edward Cullen in Twilight completed vampires' transformation from horror creatures into romantic fantasies for young audiences. Edward isn't threatening. He represents relationship perfection, reimagining vampirism as supernatural enhancement rather than curse. Edward violated every traditional vampire convention. He sparkles when exposed to sunlight rather than combusting, making him literally luminescent. He doesn't rest in coffins but lives in luxurious mansions. He plays classical piano, operates expensive mobiles, and repeatedly attends high school. His vegetarian vampire family consumes animal blood exclusively instead of human, positioning themselves as morally superior good vampires. His romance with Bela Swan defined the entire franchise. Edward constantly warns Bela she should maintain distance because she's endangered by his presence, but this only intensifies her obsession. Critics identified troubling relationship dynamics. Edward stalks Bela, observes her sleeping without consent, controls her social connections, and displays possessive jealousy reframed as romantic devotion. Teenage audiences remained unconcerned. They perceived Edward as ideal, impossibly beautiful, eternally devoted, wealthy, talented, and tormented by love for someone ordinary who suddenly becomes central to his immortal existence. Pattinson himself maintained ambivalence toward the role. During interviews, He frequently mocked Edward's characterization, questioning his decisions and calling him ridiculous. Behind-the-scenes footage reveals Pattinson barely concealing his disdain for the material. Nevertheless, he committed fully to the performance, capturing Edward's tortured intensity and smoldering stares that entranced millions of fans. Cultural impact proved massive. Twilight generated vampire enthusiasm comparable to Beatlemania, spawning numerous imitators across young adult literature and television. The Team Edward versus Team Jacob debate became a generational marker. Pattinson's face appeared on countless bedroom walls, lunchboxes, and school supplies. The sparkling effect particularly divided audiences. Horror enthusiasts condemned it as emasculating vampires and destroying the genre, while teenage fans found it romantic. Edward was literally too beautiful and pure for darkness to conceal him. Level 7. Bill Skarsgård's Count Orlok, 2024, The Return to Pure Evil. Bill Skarsgård's Count Orlok in Robert Eggers's 2024 Nosferatu represents horror's deliberate reclamation after decades of romanticized vampires. This explicitly rejects sparkles and teenage romance, restoring vampires as embodiments of disease, death, and horrific violation. Eggers's vision demanded Skarsgård become completely inhuman. Daily makeup application required hours, incorporating over 60 prosthetic pieces covering his entire body. The design created something fundamentally connected to rats, plague, and corruption, featuring bloated features, corpse-like skin pallor, elongated skeletal fingers ending in sharp nails, and a thick Transylvanian mustache partially concealing rat-like teeth, making their revelation more shocking. Skarsgård completely transformed his voice through intensive training with an Icelandic opera singer, naturally lowering his vocal register by an entire octave. Through throat singing exercises, larynx manipulation, and rigorous daily vocal practice, he created profoundly deep, booming tones that sound genuinely inhuman. Much of Orlok's initial presence manifests orally before visually, his voice echoing through darkness before his terrifying physical form appears. To enhance the otherworldly effect, Skarsgård deliberately isolated himself from other cast members throughout filming, ensuring his appearances always felt genuinely alien and intimidating. This Orlok isn't seductive or romantic whatsoever. He represents walking pestilence, bringing disease and death wherever he travels. Production incorporated 2,000 live rats to create authentic plague atmosphere. One defining sequence shows Orlok looming silently above Ellen Hutter's bed, elongated nails extended as shadows stretched dramatically across walls, directly referencing Murnau's 1922 original imagery. Another chilling moment depicts him emerging from his coffin surrounded by swarming rats, hollow eyes locked on prey. Skarsgård described embodying Orlok as conjuring pure evil, acknowledging it required significant time to psychologically separate from the character after production concluded. This Orlok systematically removes all romantic vampire elements. He doesn't seduce, he violates. He doesn't sparkle, he decays. He represents vampires as they existed in original folklore, creatures embodying disease and death, unstoppable forces of corruption destroying everything they contact.